Is any team going to be using Clove in VCT Pacific? Yes, though maybe not as many. What's up, YouTube? Today we're going to be taking a look at the newest agent released in Valorant, Clove. And specifically, we're going to see if we think any of the teams in VCT Pacific will be bringing out the newest agent in their matches for Stage 1 of VCT Pacific. Before we talk about Clove in relation to teams specifically in VCT Pacific, I want to talk about my overview of Clove so far. Now, when Clove was first shown off during the show match at Masters Madrid, and when we got our kind of first looks, the short introductions to their abilities, my initial thought was that we were going to run into the Lee Sin problem. Now, what do I mean by the Lee Sin problem? If you've ever played League of Legends, then you'll know of a character named Lee Sin. And one of the problems that Lee Sin had for the longest time, and I don't know, maybe still does, it's been a while since I've really dug deep into League of Legends, so forgive me if I'm a little outdated and becoming a boomer here. One of the problems that Lee Sin had was he was simply too good at too many things. And this was a problem because it came innately with what his kit was able to do, right? He was able to have chase and mobility with one of his abilities that also did really good one-on-one damage. And then you had more mobility in his shielding skill, where he was able to bounce around but also get sustain off of the shield and heal if you use it correctly. Then you had AoE crowd control and debuffing that was really able to control an overall team fight, or also once again give you an advantage in a one-on-one fight. Then you had an ultimate that was a really great initiation tool that also had great crowd control both in terms of solo and team fighting if you were skilled enough, but it also works as an escape tool because it kicks people away. Now you combine all these things and suddenly Lee Sin was pretty good in the jungle, maybe too good in the jungle. He was really solid in top lane, and then as numbers got shuffled around, he was still pretty solid in the support role in the bottom lane. He was still able to be used in mid lane to some extent, etc, etc, etc. And the problem becomes that the only way to really seemingly nerf him enough is to make him just not worth it, right? Because even if the numbers are low, the fact that he can contribute in all these ways was making him a little too dominant across the board. Now, this is different than when one character is just too good in what they do. So, for example, if we bring it back to Valorant, like Jet and Chamber were a little too good at what they do, right? Maybe just a little bit too much coverage across the map. You know, maybe it's just the fact that they have way too many things that let them get away for free in the case of Jet, things like that. Now, that's tough to balance as well, but at the end of the day, they're still going to be within their own silo. But I was afraid that Clove was going to start to encroach into a semi-duelist, a semi-initiator, still going to be a controller, could still be a decent, sentinel type anchor. And I was thinking, ooh, this is risky territory. But now, having played Clove a little bit, I'm pleasantly surprised because I think the numbers are fairly well balanced. Now, as we talk about the kit, I do want to put out a disclaimer. I actually think this agent is very good for the overall game health. I'm actually now convinced that it's going to be really good for the overall game health and great for solo queue. I mean, maybe too strong for solo queue, so in that case, you might have to tweak some numbers here and there. But overall, I think it's going to be good because, again, no matter what, there's not as much pressure to play this agent to fill certain roles, right? It's going to make it a lot more flexible for solo queue specifically when you're playing your own ranked games. But will Clove see pro play? Exactly what is Clove good at? Well, let's talk about the traditional senses of a controller. Generally, controllers are fairly good at anchoring on defense, and of course, on the attack, not only are they assisting in initiating the fight, but they're going to want to either be a strong second line of entry or someone who's pretty good at lurking around the map post execute. So let's talk about defense first. Well, quite frankly, the smokes, while it's great that you can place them wherever you so wish, they're not that long, right? It's going to be 14 seconds, so again, I mean, yeah, it's going to be a smoke, but it's not going to be as dominant. But then they're on a 30-second timer, so if we get rid of this, if I just place it, it's a 30-second timer, so actually slightly on the longer end. Now, the cooldown itself is the same as Omen, but again, the smokes are shorter than Omen by just a little bit. So you're not going to be able to cycle through it as well. So generally, you're going to want to always keep at least one in the bank in case, you need to make sure that you're covering two different sides. Second of all, now the smokes are crystal clear inside. So if you're ever looking to do any ratty plays, that's something you're going to have to watch out for on top of that. Then we talk about what else you can delay with. Now, obviously, if you have any other ability that basically assists in a fight or can be type of a initiator type ability. So for instance, for Omen, that would be the Paranoia, which is, you know, it blinds and it's linear, so it takes and deafens, quite frankly, which might be one of the bigger parts, so that pushes them away. With the metal, it does assist you in fighting, but also you're gonna have to make sure that you have the angles ready to go, right? With Paranoia, you can obviously hide here and send it, right? You can always hide behind a wall. You could hide here and send it. You could even hide here and send it down a main, things like that. But with the metal, you're gonna have to be a bit closer. You're gonna have to basically be ready to fight. And that's the whole intent of that ability, is to assist you in the fight rather than delay them. Now, granted, obviously you can do something like this and then throw that so that if anyone who comes in, the radius is very big, so that you can make sure anyone who does come in gets punished. But it doesn't last and push them back any further, right? Once it pops, if they know the timing of what you're doing, they just wait for it to pop and they could still go for the side execute and things like that. The difference, again, is with a Paranoia, it's, first of all, it's linear, so it does push them back much further in terms of displacing them. And then if they do get hit by it, the duration is going to be longer in terms of they're not going to have the confidence to come in at all because there's just no information. Whereas with the Decay, I mean, yeah, it's going to be risky, especially in pro play, because everyone's going to be hitting their shots. But it's not going to be as effective as a Paranoia, in my opinion. Then you look at the Pick Me Up, which is, again, the heal after the kill. I mean, first of all, similar to Reyna, if you're not getting the kill, that ability is useless. But if you are getting the kill in terms of defense, sure, it lets you reposition a little bit. It lets you get the overheal, so you can still buy enough time as an anchor for your team to come in for the retake or to flood the site, things like that. So I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you. Now, on top of that, the ultimate, as long as you kind of pick and choose where you're anchoring, it could help a decent amount, right? So maybe you just take contact. Again, similar to Reyna's Dismissed, you're able to use it, buy a lot more time for your teammates to arrive, things like that. Now, on top of that, on the attacking side, we should just note, one-ways are possible, but only in limited areas. So you can do it, for instance, on Ascent A, but you cannot do it on Ascent B, right? So you can't get any one-ways going on these corners on Ascent B. It's the same thing on, things like Lotus, right? You're able to one-way on C in front of Mound, but you cannot one-way, for instance, like the revolving doors, etc., etc. So there's some limitations. Now, when you're attacking, obviously, the fact that you can place 2 smokes simultaneously, great. Right, that means that when you're ready for the execute, you can just make sure that every angle that you want covered is covered, and you're able to get going. Second of all, metal, it's going to be great for clearing out kind of close quarters. Also, again, if you're going for the attack, it's going to help delay them if they want to try to flood or anything like that. So it's really good against flood, and it's going to help assist either your duelist or yourself. Now, you do have to watch out. This does decay teammates, right? So including yourself. So that's just something you want to keep a note of. Now, the pick-me-up, I mean, on attack, it's great, right? Whether you're going in with your team as a second line of entry so you can trade and then continue to keep the overheal, or if you're going on the lurk, so if you're, somewhere in mid, let's see, you get a kill, then you're able to not only get the movement speed, so now you can put pressure on other parts of the map, but you get the overheal, so you stay alive, etc., etc. So that's pretty good. And then the ultimate, I mean, again, if you want to use it as an initiation tool, that's available to you, but obviously that's going to require a lot of good teamwork. Overall, what we've seen here is that it doesn't really seem like Clove excels at any one of these parts, which is, I think, how these types of agents should be balanced, right? They're going to be quite a menace in ranked, I assume, especially because as long as you have better aim, you're going to get the kill, you have the pick-me-up, etc., etc. And smokes are always going to be pretty good in ranked, and these smokes are pretty easy to place, right? So they're not going to be, they're not going to take you away, they're not going to take you as long to learn, things like that. Now, I will say, as some people have been saying, really good to use with shotguns. And as a shotgun enjoyer, that's great news for me. Right, so obviously the metal is going to help as well, because now you can really just spray through, and most likely they're all going to be one shot as long as they're somewhere a reasonable distance. And then you've got smokes that come on a cooldown. You've got a heal and a move speed, so you can get in, get out pretty quickly, or you can go for the chase. And then, of course, your ultimate as well kind of lets you take a close quarter fight and then draw them back in as long as you have a teammate there to trade for you. So, yeah, there are some instances where you can use this. But overall, a lot of people, when they first saw the kit for Clove, seem to compare them to Omen, which I would agree. And I think the things that Clove excels at just aren't really as comparable to Omen. So Omen has decent flexibility, some decent mobility, but also a lot of delay capability, right? The fact that you can do many more creative one-ways, the fact that Paranoia is one of the best delay tools that you could have in the game, and the fact that, of course, your mobility comes with verticality as well, so they're going to have to continue to clear more corners. You can play more mind games with that. There's just a lot more you can do kind of anchoring on a site. Now, on top of that, you can anchor, and then when you have your ultimate, you can provide fast backup as well. Things like that. So I think Omen is a little bit more flexible as a controller specifically. And then the other thing, just because of how the smokes work, is you might kind of compare them to Brimstone, but that's not really comparable again, because Brimstone doesn't have smokes that come off cooldown. Clove does. And then on top of that, Brimstone is very much, you know, a post-plant, kind of site execute and then post-plant type of agent. Whereas Clove, post-plant, you're not getting much, right? You want to be in the fight, you don't want to hang back, etc., etc. So my conclusion is that basically you want to get into fights with Clove, right? You want them to somewhat disrespect your smokes. And that way, you can really make use of your other abilities, right? It's the same thing with metal. So sure, things like Paranoia, things like flashes, they help you get kills too. But the real deal there is that you're denying information, right? You're making sure that they have no idea what's going on. And if they continue to fight you, well, then they're going to lose because they have no idea what's going on. Whereas with metal, they have every idea of what's going on. It's just that you can like you can hit their body and still get the kill, right? Or you can get multi-kills a little bit easier, etc., etc. Now, obviously, if they respect it and they disperse, sure, you get a little bit of delay, but if that's what you're going for, again, other than certain cases where you want to cover a much bigger radius, I don't know, right? So, like, if they're stuck in market, let's say, I guess, right, this might be a little bit more useful as it covers almost the entire area, something like that. But otherwise, again, flashes and Paranoia maybe gets the job done a little better if you're just making sure that you know, dislocate where they are and make sure that they disperse. So and then things like pick me up, I mean, sure, there's two ways to use it. Again, you can get a kill and then you can use it right away, get the speed buff and try to get out. Obviously this type of distance, I think you're probably still getting shot anyway, but it's a matter of like if you're getting a kill and then jiggling back in, or you want to reposition, or you know that someone else is chasing you, things like that. But the other ways I see it being used really well is you can keep up the tempo, right? So if you get a kill, you immediately get the ovary on the speed buff. Now you're pressuring the fight a little bit quicker than someone else would, and you're coming back at full health even if you took some damage. So overall, this is an agent that wants to get contact and then wants to continue that pressure. The only other thing that would indicate otherwise is the fact that you can use your smokes ruse from death. And that's one of the things that you would consider. But again, obviously, you're not aiming to use that, right? No one's going to say, well, we should really die as Clove to maximize their potential. But it's just something that really helps in terms of specifically lurking, right? So where you position can get a little bit more creative because you can go for lurks, whether it's on attack or defense from mid, and even if you get traded, you're still able to provide, you know, smokes, whether it's on defense or if it's on attack, let's say, right, you die here or something like that, you're still able to get smokes. So the radius is smaller on death, but you're able to get smokes on both sites, things like that. Or if you're anchoring on site, you can still put smokes down for retakes, etc., etc. With the idea that Clove seems to be an aggressive smokes, right? An aggressive controller. Now let's take a look at some of the maps. Now, when I say aggressive, again, keep in mind that there's two ways to look at that. Either you're kind of continuing the aggro, keeping up the tempo, or you're just a very, very oppressive anchor. There's two ways to look at that viewpoint. Now, when we come to Breeze, we're not going to stick around too long. because overall, there's not much you can do. I mean, sure, the smokes cover all the important parts of the map, so like that's good. Again, not anything that like an Astra or an Omen couldn't do better, or a Harbor even. So I'm just not really seeing the value. And then on top of that, I mean, if we're talking about the other abilities, sure, there are choke points just like any map, but they're so far apart. And there's multiple ways that they can strike the site, and the site itself is so wide that if they're already in, like, you're not covering all the angles that they can get out into the site, right? So if someone dashes in here and someone hops over there and someone hops over here, like if you're even a second late, this metal isn't doing much. If you think they're back site, I mean, sure, that covers whoever's on the steps, or it covers whoever's on the corner, but it's not doing much to push out the other part of the map. And on top of that, because the site is so big, these distances are pretty far. Right? So you could barely get it into the corner, but it's not like you can really get it in to the back of the wall. Next is Lotus, and like I talked about, yes, you can do some one-ways like on C, but you're not going to be able to do it on things like the revolving door. They will just land wherever closest. In case you're wondering, like, why can't you get creative? If you put it anywhere where you're not supposed to be able to, it just dislocates it to the closest corner. So I think in some ways, I think that's a good quality of life, especially for solo queue, right? Because if you misclick, you're still able to at least get some type of smoke instead of it just like dropping into the wall or something like that. So with that said, on Lotus, I mean, listen, I think as a secondary controller, there's some value, right? So again, you have recyclable smokes, so you're able to continue to keep certain parts of the map. If you already took control a little bit, you're able to kind of cycle your smokes well enough. Of course, right off the bat on A, you can make sure that you have an advantageous fight with something like that, with the metal, so that helps with the rubble fight. It's going to be the same thing over on C. Even on B, it's going to make sure that they really get pushed out. And then there's certain parts where things like the pick-me-up and ult are going to have some value, right? So you can relocate, and there's, as long as you're working with the team, they can always try to trade for you in more advantageous angles, etc., etc. So it's not too bad. But overall, again, I mean, the coverage isn't fantastic. Sure, you can help with both sites, but after death, obviously this gets a little bit smaller, so there's not too much you can do. But it's okay. But again, it's just a matter of, well, it's fine, but does it really do anything strictly better than, say, an Omen, right? Or in some maps, Astra. I'm not entirely sure. Right, I think Lotus is one where we could see it if it's a team that's really intent on continuing to get contact, continuing to keep up the pressure. But otherwise, I'm not seeing too many teams willing to shake up their compositions for this sake. And also, we are kind of shying away from some of the double controller here for a lot of teams. So probably not going to see Clove as a solo controller. Now, Icebox is, it's a fun one to think about, just because, again, you can obviously have certain smokes going on like this for the one way if they're coming into A main. Obviously, you can just put it there to close that off. If you're coming in from the attacking side, you can get your smokes on heaven like you normally would, things like that. But obviously on Icebox, orb smokers are rarely ever going to be solo controllers. I don't really see a time and world where we're ever going to shift to that becoming meta or even really viable, to be honest. So we're not talking as a solo controller. So then we're talking about secondary. Now, personally, I'm a fan of the Omen ideas as a secondary controller on Icebox. I think there's some neat things that you can do that only an Omen can do on Icebox. But part of that is because Icebox is a very vertical map. So there's quite a few things that Omen can do to help add pressure when it comes to verticality. Clove doesn't have that advantage. So then we talk about all the other things like, whoa, okay, well, I didn't mean to do that, but it does bounce like that. But we're talking about things like the metal, sure, right? You're going to have multiple areas where the radius is actually going to be quite helpful. So something like this, it's going to clear out both here and here. The thing is right, Reyna, for some teams, and then also in solo queue, Reyna actually gets the job done in Icebox just because, again, there's so many nooks and crannies, especially on the A site, right? So that's because of the whole kill and heal. Obviously, for Reyna, the dismiss is a big part of that as well. But, you know, if you're able to jump up, get a kill, get the heal instantly, and then kind of reposition with the move speed, things like that. Yeah, I mean, I can see Clove having some value. But outside of that, I mean, where else are you really going? The only other thing I could think of is, I mean, maybe because of the refreshing smokes, like you can really use Clove to help. Excuse me. You can really use Clove to help. Well, I just can't. Oh, I'm putting it too close to the wall. You can really use Clove to help pressure mid, right? And that way, as the secondary controller, you can still help like cover a certain part. If your other controller is either dead or maybe they've run out of whatever resources they have, so you can do something like this. You can still hold on to mid. You can help reposition if you get a kill with the pick me up and the ult. So there's a little bit of that. But I think you're better off looking at other ways of helping control mid if you were really intent on making that work. And in terms of B site, I mean, yeah, ever since they fixed it, sure, you can orb smoke it, but again, that's not what you're usually going to be going for. So we return to Ascent. Now, I think Ascent is going to be one of the maps where we're going to see a lot of potential for Clove. So first of all, you can still do this one way. So there's that. Of course, again, if they're going for the orb or something like that, that radius is huge, right? It covers the covey and anyone coming in to a main. And then if you're anchoring on the site, again, we've talked about how you can continue to refresh your smokes a little bit. You could even throw this like right above here and then just make sure that it kind of bounces off of a wall, and that's going to make sure that anyone who's following in after the initial entry is going to be decayed. You could bounce it off of other walls as well, right? So if you put your smoke up and do something like that, it still covers the entire entrance. So it's going to either delay or decay them afterwards. Things like that. There's a lot of areas a lot of corners you can actually help clear with the metal on this map. So I like that. On top of that, as an orb smoker, obviously there's, some decent ways where you can keep mid control and mid pressure, right? If you've already taken a little bit of time, or, if you're already on the lurks and you just haven't been spotted. Again, there's a lot more you can do, just because I think, again, as a lurker, Clove has okay potential. I mean, you're not going to have hard info similar to a Sentinel on another part of the map. But similar to Omen, you're going to be able to continue to provide support for your team on executes. So if you're a little bit closer here, obviously you can help smoke heaven as well. And then you're able to get kills, trade, move on, things like that. So on B, first of all, this radius is going to be pretty big. It hits anyone that's on the ground coming in, so you can really utilize that for things like the Odin spam. Of course, you could even toss it here, and it delays anyone that's coming in. And in fact, anyone who's kind of running in, they're all going to get hit, even if they're trying to get into the covey for safety. So again, it looks something like this. You can toss the smoke up. You kind of missed the throw, but it still delays anybody coming in, or maybe if the jet's trying to dash in for switch, you're able to get that advantage with the metal as well. Again, pretty good value in terms of delaying, and same thing can be said. Obviously, you can kind of bounce around your own smokes. And then if they're coming in through lane, toss that, pops, they're all decayed, things like that. Now, on the attack, again, I mean, you have two smokes, so it's going to be pretty easy peasy. You're going to be able to just get the standard smokes. Right, you can help clear that with metal. You can make sure that they're not peeking in from there with metal. Same thing can be said over here. And then going into backside, obviously the metal is going to help clear or make the fight quite a bit easier. It's not going to clear the entire thing, so you're going to have to kind of pick and choose where you throw it. If you want to throw it against the back wall and kind of hit the far side, things like that. The thing about Ascent is this is one of those maps where I think if you are confident in taking contact, keeping up the tempo matters a lot. And again, I think that's where Clove is going to benefit a lot from the team composition and style. If you're a team that's willing to do that, go with things like the Rays, the Jets, the Reynas, a lot of these dive duelists that are able to continue the fight. Clove is going to supplement that quite a bit, but again, as a solo controller, might be a little rough. Sunset is another map where I could see Clove getting some love. Of course, again, probably not as a solo controller, but if you wanted to run double controller and kind of have a little bit more initiation tool as well, you're going to be able to find some value. So obviously, again, you can cover all the usual spots, as you can see, although I misclicked. And then on top of that, if you hear them coming in, like even if you're holding this angle, you're able to metal if they're getting close, and immediately they'll have to back out, or you'll instantly get that initial kill. It's going to be the same thing if you're holding back sight. If you think they're coming in, just toss it there, or you can even toss it here, and whoever's dashing in is going to get decayed. Things like that. You could throw it from here as well, I believe. Yeah, you might have to watch out so it doesn't bounce off the textures there, but you're able to make sure that it covers the entire entrance. Let's talk about mid on Sunset. Obviously, if you're on the attacking side, you can help smoke that and then move up. Oops, didn't want to turn that on. And then you're still able to get some coverage, right? You're able to still cover, let's say, something like this. So you can cover a link for your team. You can help cover market. I mean, you could even technically cover back site. You could, I mean, when you're alive, you can cover quite a bit of everything. The only thing that's a little tough is going to be A alley, the back of site. So for that, you're going to have to lean more towards the A side. But if you die, now, of course, you're not going to have that full radius. So you are just going to have to make sure that you're kind of just covering one side or the other. But you can still assist at least a little bit. And again, if you're running double controller, that shouldn't be too much of a problem. Coming over to the A side, now because there are actual boxes here, you're going to be able to still do some of those one ways that we like to see on Sunset, whether it's here or it's going to be on this box, right? Pops up right on the corner, so that as the defenders, you are going to have that advantage. And then on top of that, obviously, just the ways that you can toss the metal to make sure that they're not approaching any further are going to be pretty solid. So if you're holding elbow, I mean, it's a really good delay tool on elbow. So let's say you back up and they're still pushing you, you're able to do that. As it pops, you can hop over or get an easy trade, get the pick me up, move on like that. There's just a lot of corners and bends that they're going to have to work around, and the radius is going to be able to cover most of the areas that you want to cover. So there's good value there. So overall, it's pretty good. Now, in terms of the pick-me-up and the ult, I think there's going to be much more specific scenarios compared to Ascent where you're going to be able to make good use of it. But in terms of you want to keep up the tempo, etc., or you want to stay in the fight, for instance, like on A site, right? If you get a kill and then you get the pick-me-up, you're able to still bounce around the site and anchor and or defend in the post plant. Now, one of the things actually that I want to talk about is the way you could use this ultimate. Obviously, it's going to be risky, but if you're always just using it to kind of take one step back, there's very specific areas on the map that you can use it on. So areas where you have kind of these step-by-step routines, and then you're always going to make sure that someone is holding even further back for the trade. But one other way you could use it, whether it's on defense or attack, is if you want to go aggressive, you go for the aggressive kill. Let's say you get traded here, and then if you use the ultimate and you basically spread out the angle, right? So now they have to get into a crossfire. They have to pick and choose. Similar to, let's say, if you were to use the Shrouded Step or something like Omen's Ultimate from the Shadows to make sure that, okay, pick and choose. Are you watching for that ghost, or are you going to make sure that you get the first contact? I mean, I guess from the Shadows you can break earlier, but that's just something I want to note, is that let's say you come out on the fight, you use your ult and you just dive in past the enemy team, and if your teammates are able to follow up on a timing, now you'd have to make sure it's on a timing, otherwise you'll all die, but that way you can make sure that you continue to fight and then move on. So that's something that I think you want to look at when you're playing Clove, especially because, again, you're going to want to be getting contact. And Sunset provides some decent areas where you can make that happen, right? So even here, like if you go for the kill and you get traded, let's say you come out over here, your teammates can help push in as well. Or maybe you're even coming here to make sure that you get vision of everyone and your teammates are filing in. Things like that. You get traded here. Again, you can always recreate another 50-50 scenario, but now your teammates are there for the crossfire. Things like that. So Sunset, Ascent, both maps that work a little bit in that sense. I personally am liking Ascent a little better, but in either case, double controller seems to be the best bet. Now we are on Bind, and Bind, again, lots of boxes, lots of trucks, things like that. So you can get certain one-ways going for your advantage if you're on defense. Obviously you can't do anything with, for instance, shower or anything like that. Here's the thing, is that on Bind, now you have these areas like lamps, or if we go over to the other side, of course, in Hookah, where there's a lot of nooks and crannies, right? And, you know, it's going to be great for, like, getting a kill, repositioning with the pick-me-up, or making sure that you can continue the fight, bait them in. You've got something like the metal, you can continue fighting. It's really good for shotguns, which, again, I think Clove should be able to utilize pretty well. And that's all great. The only problem, we should also note that you can also support, you know, some of the other side, the other site, with your smokes as well, depending on the position you're holding, right? So if you're just getting close enough, right, you can make sure that you're smoking off. You can even smoke off a little bit of main, etc., etc. The problem is lamps and hookah are not necessarily the big priorities on Bind. I'm sure you've heard casters say time and time again, you want to hold B long or showers control, or both ideally. And a big part of that is obviously that gives you use of the teleporter for free. Now, especially on A site, like if you're camped up in lamps, it helps a little bit for the retake if you're on defense. But on attack, it's like a lot of teams can just kind of help ignore it, right? You can just smoke it off and say, okay, there's one guy in lamps, like just don't push it. Because at the end of the day, you're not going to have an advantageous angle against the person who's defusing the spike. It's the same thing for if someone's coming into plant. So while you can hold on to this area very well, it's not exactly the default area you want to hold when you're anchoring a certain position. Now, I will say, obviously the metal, it's going to have some decent use here as well, right? So that's going to make sure that the spike planter or diffuser is going to be a little worried. Same thing for showers control, right? Any entrances, there's good walls that you can bounce it off of. I also think there's going to be certain value in being able to kind of like toss it from long range so it pops right above their heads, right at the wall, so that they don't really see it coming, but they'll still be decayed. So there's things you can do there on bind. It's going to be the same thing over on B site. There's some good uses for metal, that's for sure. Obviously, you know, if it's in hookah, like it's everywhere. You could throw this metal anywhere and it's going to get you value. And then obviously if they're coming in for the flood, things like that, you can make sure that they're getting hit right as they enter. But outside of that, I mean, I think the ideas are cool. I think there are cool ideas. But even with a double controller, I'm not entirely convinced, because I don't know how much Clove is doing for us for B-Long or showers. Personally, not exactly convinced. Last but not least, it's split. And initially, you might think that, oh, wouldn't be too bad on split, right? You've got tight corners where you can smoke it off, create a better angle. You still have heals to continue the fight, things like that. You have the move speed, etc., etc. And the metal, again, it's going to cover a large radius, so it still covers the entrance even after bouncing off the wall, things like that. But now we gotta always keep in mind, like, who are you competing against? And generally it's going to be the Omen, and you can't really do any of the one ways that you'd like to do, so that's already out the window. But let's talk about overall kind of delaying ability if you're on defense. So again, because the metal's pretty big in terms of in relation to the map, I think metal still is going to have some decent use here, but the problem is paranoia, similar to fault line, goes through walls, so it helps set up even more trap plays. It's much more flexible. So again, I don't know if it really compares. My mind just keeps going back to but is it in any way better than what Omen can do for you? And on split, I'm thinking probably not, right? Even as a double controller, like even if you have a Viper or an Astra and then you're considering Clove, it's like, is Clove really doing anything better than Omen? I think maybe not. Also, even in terms of what we talked about with how to use the ultimate to maybe create a crossfire again, or kind of draw the aggro so your team can go for the trades, there's just so many tighter corners that the opponents can also work around that as you're trying to distance yourself from the rest of the team, etc., etc. So I'm not too convinced when it comes to pro play for split. We talked about why some of these maps we think are going to be favored for Clove, right? So again, it's about you get a lot more benefit of keeping up the tempo, keeping up the pressure. You're able to utilize more parts of the map as Clove, right? So specifically things like lurking in mid, or maybe you're still able to do certain one-ways, things like that. Now, then let's talk about which teams we think can benefit from that. In VCT Pacific, we generally used to have a lot of teams that used to play the old quote-unquote DRX style, right? Very set utility usage on a timer. It's all by calculation. You go for the site executes, you go for the set play retakes, things like that. Now, this has been changing overall, but still at the end of the day, I think a lot of the teams still can't really shake off that habit of, we have to go on a timing, and this is exactly what that means, right? It's an algorithm, and you go step by step. Clove isn't really going to benefit that style of play too much. You want to be able to take contact and keep up the pressure. You want to make sure you're always playing for trades, right? You want to make sure that there's someone else there to continue the pressure with you. And generally, obviously, the Clove kind of wants to be the second person to trade so they can heal back up and continue the advantage. First team that comes to mind, I'm sure, as everyone has said, and even the pros have said when they were previewing rather Clove, is going to be PaperX. I think PaperX could definitely make use of this. Any of their players could play Clove, quite frankly, and they could make it work. And with their style of, if we get a kill, we continue, right? We keep up the pressure. We really try to overwhelm our opponents. I think that's going to mean a lot. And then even if you die, you're still able to put up smokes. I mean, this is a dream come true. So PaperX is definitely up there. Now, in terms of other teams, it's actually going to be DFM, Detonation FocusMe. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. They still haven't gotten a win. Why does it even matter? Now, first of all, as a side note, I do think they're going to get their first win, and more than one, in fact, this year in 2024. But if you take a look at the old Crazy Raccoon roster, they also used to play a lot in terms of creating opportunities for May and then setting up for trades. The problem was they weren't always on point with their trading. But that aside, as they continue to try to figure out their style, I think this could work because, again, if you have things like the smokes that you can continue to work on a cooldown to take space bit by bit, you have things like the metal that really help the fight a little bit more in your favor, whether it's for your duelist or yourself, and then you have something like the pick-me-up. Obviously, May's still going to be playing the primary duelist, but you could have someone like, say, Cess or maybe Anthem that's able to play a bit more of a proactive second line of attack or defense, and that should give a little bit more confidence for May as well. Talon's another one that's going to be that already showcased in kickoff that they are willing to play aggressively and they will keep up the pressure. They will play for contact. On top of that, you've got several players that used to play duelist in some capacity, and specifically Governor and Ban seem to be working a lot in tandem. Now, Ban, of course, was playing a lot of that KO as well, so he was playing a lot of flash initiation, so who knows exactly how the roles work out. But if you were able to play something like a double controller and you had the opportunity to entrust Ban to be that second line of attack or second line of defense, basically the traitor for Governor, basically tied at the hip, they could do some damage. I could see that working out. I mean, on top of that, this is a team that also works a lot of their lurking into their plays, right? Whether it's Chip Boys or Crews, things like that. So that's another opportunity where I could see Talon try to make the Clove work. But again, what's going to be the downside is generally you're going to want a double controller. So we'll have to wait and see. Last but not least, surprise, surprise, the recent grand finalists of Masters Madrid and the first Korean team to reach a Masters or Champions grand final. It is Gen.G. Now, if you were listening and if you've kind of heard me talk about Gen.G and you followed my co-streams for Masters Madrid, etc., you'll already have caught on to this. I talked about if you're playing for contact, if you're playing for trades, and if you want to keep up the tempo, Clove seems to be pretty good. Well, let me tell you which team loves to play like that. It's going to be Gen.G. Now, they're not as fast-paced as PaperX, but they're always working as a crew where you're really just focusing on trading. Yeah, they have good utility usage. They've got some cool set plays as well. But every piece of move that, every move they make, every piece of movement that they're taking action on is based on, do we have angles to trade on, right? That's when they succeed. When that falls apart, Gen.G falls apart. So you put someone like Charon on the Clove, follows alongside Texture or Meteor, goes for the trade, gets the overheal. They're able to use the metal just to make sure that they're getting more kills, things like that. Munchkin could be doing the same thing as well. You have these members who are willing to do that. They can also play some of this double controller thanks to Munchkin being fairly flexible. So I think this team could also make good use of Clove, and it might actually maybe enable them to become even more proactive and be a bit more aggressive than they are currently. Again, just speculation, but I think there's room. I think there's some room for expectation. Does that mean there's zero chance some of these other teams are going to play Clove? Definitely not. I mean, first of all, who knows? But again, if you look at, once you get your hands on Clove, you'll realize, to really maximize my value, I want to be aggressive. I want to continue to take contact, or I want to be this aggressive anchor that's just taking over one specific position, things like that. Some of these other teams haven't really shown me that type of play with other agents yet, so I'm not too convinced. But hey, I'll take what I can get. If any of these teams showcase it during VCT Pacific Stage 1, I'd be more than thrilled, because one of the things that I do think holds back Pacific a little bit is the fear to try, right? We don't have too many risk takers aside from PaperX. So hopefully now, again, with some of these more aggressive players, right? Players with a lot more confidence in just their pure fundamentals, things like that. Now, hopefully we have more teams and coaching staff that are willing to experiment and take a couple risks, especially given that if you can stack up some championship points here and there, you're still going to have a good shot to get to champions, so there might be a little bit more room to experiment. But that's my thoughts on Clove, the capabilities and the possibilities of seeing this agent in VCT Pacific Stage 1, which of course starts next weekend, just 7 days away. So let me know down in the comments below, do you think any of the teams are going to be playing Clove here at VCT Pacific? And if so, which team do you think will showcase the agent for the first time? Let me know down in the comments below. Of course, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and of course, subscribe to the channel as well. Don't forget to turn on your notifications as we will continue to put out videos every week during VCT Pacific. Also, any of the days that I'm not casting on the official broadcast, we're looking to do co-streams from home, so you'll definitely be able to catch some of the matches here on this channel as well. That's it for now, and I'll see you guys next time.